Hi everyone, it's Patrick from 8-Bit Doodads. Here with an update on my Apple II disk benchmarking video I published a week or so ago. I wanted to do some more tests, this time concentrating on the Apple II GS and also looking at some of the other cards. You can see I have a mess of them over here, some that I haven't tested before and some that I want to test specifically in the GS.
Say, kids, what time is it?
It's 8-Bit Doodads time!
Okay, first just a little bit of a background. When I went to do the GS testing, actually when I went to do all the benchmarking, I'd come across two utilities, and you saw me use one of them this last time, which is this um, stress ProDOS file system testing utility, which could also help you initialize hard drives, partition them, format them, check for bad blocks, etc. But it had a timing test on it, the last iteration, and you saw me use that on the Apple IIe, and I actually ran one or two tests at GS. But at the time, I also found that there was a GSOS specific um, disk benchmarking utility that several people have used and used to produce benchmarks across the variety of cards here and others. So I wanted to get that up and running as well. And that's called Benchmarked with a capital D at the end. And it's by BrutalDeluxe software out of France. Um, I loaded it up on my GSOS and I kept getting an error every time I was running. And I have to give a shout out and thanks to Anton Vignow of BrutalDeluxe, who was one of the writers of this piece of software. And he told me about the things to check, where it should work, and confirmed. And what I found was I went and got a pristine image of GSOS 6.02. I was running 604, but that image I had installed a whole bunch of things on, I think for my Apple Talk videos and then for some other things. So just to be safe, went with a base image. I actually took the one off of that comes with the floppy emu. It has a GS602 image. I loaded that up here, in this case on my CFFA. The only reason I did that was because I could move the USB stick to my PC and move the file easiest. And in fact, we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And lo and behold, I'll bring up the this. Oop, here we go. The reason you see me, you might see me grab two different mices, and I'm looking at two different cursors, is I'm displaying the output of this on the screen as you see it, and that's sort of my monitor. And so sometimes I pick up the PC mouse and try to click on this window that really, the GS obviously isn't going to respond to that. So I'll run this test. This is the Benchmark D by BrutalDeluxe. And you can see there are several options here. Can do a file level read and write, which the last test we did also did, and it can do a block by block read or even a buffered read. So if we want, I'll go ahead and select two, and there's on this 800K disk image is a 512K file. And it just read it and we got 51K. So now that's a file read, which if you watch the last video, you know, those are using MLI ProDOS calls to open a file and read blocks from the file through ProDOS. There's overhead in that. So we see the 51K. I'm going to come back here and do the read block by block test, which is reading the entire disk image. That's why 800K, 1600 blocks. And this should give a little bit better performance because the call is just to retrieve the block, and okay, that's 61K. Now on other machines, I have seen much greater other boards I should say, storage devices, I've seen those numbers differ greatly. One of the things I noticed as I've been doing this testing, and I saw this on the booty, some really bad numbers, and I'm going to be trying them again for this test, and also with this, is the USB stick seems to perform slowly. And in fact, I think if I go and do a test off of the partition on the CF card, I'll get much better results. Um, I'm wondering if I have old and slow USB sticks, or this one has just been written to and read so much that is very defragmented, although that doesn't make any difference because um, it's flash storage, or just the interface to it is so slow, and whether a USB 3 stick or some other uh, stick that has better performance characteristics would actually see improvement here. And that is something I do want to check out. Now, as I said, I've um, run the BrutalDeluxe here you see, and in fact, when you're done and we quit, well, it's a text mode app. It is a GSOS or ProDOS 16 app, and it uses some of the calls that are built into GSOS to read and write from the disk. So you can't run this under ProDOS 8. And as you notice, it came up and asked me to do a speed test, but it didn't allow me to change the volume. So one of the things that you have to do with using this particular benchmark is you have to put it on every single device and copy it around, which can be a little bit of a pain. It's not so much of an issue if you're just testing the things that are in your GS, and if I was to put a single another card in here and have the volume mounted, I could just copy this folder over and we'd be done. But it's a little bit more inconvenient for me changing out all the cards. So I'm going to go back to the other test that we did before, which was this stress ProDOS file system. And here I'm using the Microsoft mouse again, or the Windows mouse. And I'm looking at the wrong cursor. So here we see that test. And if we click to run it, we can still launch from GSOS. What happens is, because it's a ProDOS 8 app, I don't know if you might have seen the ProDOS screen come up really quickly. It switches to ProDOS 8, allows you to do a time test, and we can still quit back out. The reason that I like this a little bit is if I wanted to, I can put this as a bootable floppy on, say, a floppy emu out the back, and then just sit here and swap into slot 7 whatever cards that I want to test. The other reason I'm okay switching back to this is I went and ran some tests back and forth, and it seems the type of testing that's being done by both utilities is the same, and they're giving roughly the same results. They both will do a file read or write test. They will both do a block read of the whole test. Having said that, one of the things that I have figured out in doing these tests, and I'm going to try to set up with as I move through the cards, it's real convenient on all of these things, like the Booty, the Microdrive Turbo, everything, to have 32 meg drives, partitions, because that's the max, so might as well give ProDOS the maximum. In both utilities, they do the same thing. If you do a block read test, what they do is they read every block of the device. If you have a 32 meg volume, you're going to be waiting a whole long time for those reads to occur. So you're almost better off to have, say, a 2 meg or a 4 meg volume, because it'll complete the tests much faster. Also, both the utilities, similarly, will do they can read and write a 512K test file, a 1 meg test file, a 4 meg test file, an 8 meg test file, and a 16 meg test file. I think they both do 16. I know BrutalDeluxe does 16. This utility may stop at 8. But here's the thing. Um, you have to have the room for those, which now gets you back to the 32 meg volume, which makes that last test longer. So just to remind you of this test, if we want to, we can run a time test. So if we want, I'll just come here and run the test against that same 1600K volume. And I just thought about this. Um, I don't know if the space, there was space on there to write that first file. And that wasn't 1600K, it's an 800K volume with 1600K. Now, this is giving me 39, 170, 200. I believe those are better numbers than what we just saw from the USB stick using the BrutalDeluxe. So there is a difference. I think the read time, the file write time was about the same, but the file read and the block read are much better. Perhaps we should go back and take a look at that. So we're seeing 39, 170, 200, and just to verify, and that's off that benchmark D. We're quitting that benchmark D volume. And here we go. And I really have to stop using the wrong mouse. So let me do the read test. Actually, the read test was 170 on the other, and the block was 200. I want to say this was either 53 or 61. 51K. So the read is much slower here. Now, whether that's a GSOS overhead, just like the other one had a ProDOS 8 MLI calls overhead. Now, the block by block should be the same calls to directly get bytes, but again, there might be some GSOS GS-ROM toolbox code. Okay, we're only getting 61, so we're getting 200K at the ProDOS level. Okay, I've run all the tests now, and I plotted all the data into a chart, and I thought I would just walk through some of this, give you some of my interesting notes. With one exception, all of these were done using that ProDOS file stressor application that has a time. In fact, that's what's shown on the running GS screen. The one exception is I put in there the test done using the BrutalDeluxe that we've already talked about. You'll notice it on the CFFA, on the CF card, and the one that says BD. Both of those were using the same card, the same partitions and everything, but using the BrutalDeluxe test, it was much lower. Now, I've talked to the developer of this. We've actually done some follow-up, and he confirmed there are many more layers that you're going through. So that overhead will slow it down. But if what you're wanting to test is how is GSOS going to perform, that actually might be more accurate in terms of how each of these, how each card running under that test would perform file operations, as opposed to exposing the raw speed of the device. And that's simply because with the other tests, the file read tests are going through ProDOS 8 MLI. The block read is hitting the disk directly, so you don't have that extra layer. With the BrutalDeluxe, it's that same sort of thing, except for there's 2 or 3 more layers. I think he said something. There's a device dispatcher that you have to go through, the FST that you have to go through. the ROMs and everything else. So it's almost like there are 4 levels of calls to get to that file as opposed to 2. Um, Starting off on the left of the chart, you'll see I have RAM and RAM disk. I believe that RAM test it only does a block test on that one. And what it's using is what in a 2E would be that second 64K. And remember, this is a ProDOS 8 application, so it probably loads up, grabs that second 64K block, assuming, there's an extended 80 column card, and even though this is a GS, it takes that, it only has that 128K and it uses that other 64K to do that RAM disk test. The next one that says RAM disk, this is if you go and put on the Apple II GS control panel or through the control panels on GSOS, you can set aside some of the memory as a RAM disk, and I set one aside as a 2 meg volume, in which at that point it looks like any other ProDOS volume, and ran the speed test against that, and it is about twice as fast. I don't know, that's possibly due to the fact that to get to the RAM on the first one, you're doing some bank switching, whereas to get to the RAM on the second one, you're sort of indirectly going through the GSOS ROMs, and it might be and at that point might be executing 65816 code to get to the extended memory, and that just is a little bit faster. For comparison, I left up here the Corvus results that I posted previously. This one is specific for the GS. And then we get into the CFFA. Basically found that USB and CF did not make a difference. I tried the microdrive turbo, and in fact, you'll see there's 2 there. And the microdrive turbo is what most people think is the fastest card for the GS today. And that first one is with the GS ROM, meaning on the microdrive turbo. Let's see if I have one. Oh, hold on. Okay. You'll see on the card there's a little chip here. The standard microdrive turbo comes with a ROM that works in the GS, but is incompatible with the 2E. So they have an alternate ROM that you can either buy separately so you can switch them out, or like I do, I have one of each card. With the GS ROM, it does DMA and other things that makes it, as you can see, a whole lot faster than if you put the 2E card or a microdrive turbo with the 2E ROM in there. Quite a performance penalty. So if you only have one of these, but you have both 2Es and GSs, pay the $25 to get the extra ROM. Now, the next one really surprised me. I, for some reason, thought the booty performed better than I saw in all the tests. And in fact, I was so concerned about it, I reran the test several times. And in fact, I took the USB stick that was on the CFFA and put it into the booty, and knowing that that was performing well on the one machine, and I was getting similar results. In fact, I think I got better read results, but worse write results, and worse top line. In fact, I think on the screen on the right is me running the booty test again, and I then ran the test both in block mode and smart port mode, and I did not see any difference. So maybe for my own reference, I'm going to probably look for some other USB sticks and give them a try, and maybe look online, see if anybody else has done some testing or has some heads up. But I had as low as a 7K file read, which is really strange. Now there's a new card coming on the market called the Ultimate Drive. And part of the reason it's being called the ultimate drive is it's really fast. And in fact, as you can see here, it performs the file reads as well as anybody else does. File writes as well as anybody else does. It does file reads much faster than anybody else does. And raw block performance was, I think, 850 or something. And why that's significant is at the end of the day, the bus in the Apple II is only about 1 megabit a second, which would give you 1 megabit, 1 megabyte a second. Basically, the bus cannot move data to a card, from a card to memory any faster than about 1000K. That card was delivering 850, 860K, which means there's very little overhead in the card, and the instructions for the ROM to deliver, to send and get data back and forth from the Apple II. It's really efficient. Yeah, it blew my mind away. We also had numbers for this for the 2E. They're not as significant. Basically, cut these in half. Actually, I shouldn't say in a 2E. The test was run in a GS and then a GS in 1 megahertz mode, and it cut these numbers in half, but that was still quite fast and would probably be the fastest card for a 2E. My next set of tests were all about SCSI. I used the Certec new clone that's available, SCSI device. I tried it with a blue SCSI 25 pin that plugs directly into that. I then also tested with an actual spinning SCSI hard drive. And lastly, because that hard drive had a 50-pin connector on it, I have some of the blue SCSIs that are 50-pin. I daisy-chained and plugged it in, and oddly found that blue SCSI performed a little bit better than the DB25 version of SCSI. And then lastly, for comparison, using the same hard drive that I did the Certec test on, I used Apple's High-Speed SCSI card to see if it performed any differently. And it was a little bit better on the file reads and writes, but block read performance, it was less. Not sure why. I can't put the DB25 SCSI onto the high speed because of the whole terminating power, where it gets power from and everything else, and I need to set that up. And I tried to do the same daisy chain check to do the blue SCSI 50 test, and for some reason it was not seeing the drive. So I'll do something on that in a follow-up video. The last thing, actually I'll jump to the very last item, which was and that should not say FC23. Basically, it was Yellowstone with a floppy emu, and it did a just raw block test, and it got about 2. I plugged the FujiNet in there, and I'm going to grab my paper, and I was getting read and write files of about 5K a second, and a block read, raw block reads of 15. So the FujiNet is somehow faster at being able to shove data down the Yellowstone card than the floppy emu is. Now, floppy emu was in, I think, 800K disk mode, 3.5-inch disk mode. A follow-up to this would be to put the floppy emu into SmartPort mode and mount a 4 megabyte hard drive image to it and see if it picks up the same speed. But it was encouraging to see that the FujiNet was actually faster than a floppy, but not as fast as a hard drive. However, having said that, at 5 for write speeds, that was better than or the same. I think the booty came in at 7. So that's the results of this batch. Clearly, I'm looking forward to getting hold of an Ultimate Drive and putting that through some extensive testing. The guy who developed it, I actually sent him the ProDOS file stressor and let him run it, and he showed me that. We've been talking ever since, and he showed me the numbers, so I thought I'd just put them up here to give a heads up. And I think a lot of people are going to be wanting that card, and partially because not only does it emulate hard drives faster than anything else, the card will also have the ability to have an Ethernet port, which will allow it to be both a CFFA. Oh, and it will have DIS2 support, and it may include WAS images. So it can be a CFFA floppy emu, but also a Ethernet 2 type device, all in one device, one slot. And I think he's just added a real-time clock, so it can be a Thunder card as well. So that's quite an exciting thing coming out. If you like this video, I appreciate it if you give me a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so you can get notified when I do future updates and other videos on our favorite 8-bit doodads.